Hello everyone and welcome back to the Brightworks and another match of Beyond All Reason. Today what I've got for you is a top tier 1v1 that was played between the creator of Bar Fight Nights, none other than Nebuchadnezzar himself, spawning in blue today as a Cortex commander on the southern side of a map that I'm actually forgetting the name of. Titan Duel, that's right, Titan Duel version 3 to be specific here. Going to be the blue commander spawning on the southeastern side right here. Spawning on the other corner. Spawning as the red commander. Spawning, as Armada. It's going to be none other than Modulo. Modulo, a very talented 1v1 commander. As you can tell here, 53 open skill is insane, but Neb definitely working their way up the ranks. Definitely becoming one of those top-notch 1v1 commanders themselves, clocking in at 40 open skill to boot. Definitely a high-level match today, and I figured we'd go ahead and take a look, because it's been a minute since I've actually taken a look at a pro-level 1v1. I think it's about time that we actually take a look at one of these on the actual cast, right? I've covered a couple of them on the live streams. For those of you that might not know, I do live stream on most Saturdays. 12 to 4 PDT is the official schedule, but usually if there's an event, I'll actually go 4 hours before that. So, 4 p.m. Well, sometimes it's even earlier than that. Gosh, I stream for a long time. Basically, I stream all day on Saturdays is usually how that goes down. Every once in a while. Best way to stay tuned about that is, of course, to join the Discord channel, where I usually put out an announcement whenever I'm going live. You're also, of course, more than welcome to follow or subscribe. I don't know exactly how Twitch does it, how YouTube does it. It's all different. But anyways, you can find me on all those platforms. There's a bunch of links down below in the description section. Anywho, that's usually where I cover these 1v1 fights. I don't cover so many of them on the main channel here, but I think it's definitely fair to say that I was intrigued to see Modulo going up against Nebuchadnezzar here. It's definitely an opportunity to take a look at some very cool top-notch gameplay. It's going to be a vehicle lab here for Modulo, opening up with a fairly stock standard start right here for a Armada commander, going into one of those vehicle labs, starting with that wind as well, which is very, very powerful in this map, going up to 19 at a maximum and 5 at a minimum, means no matter what, Armada wind turbines are going to be efficient. Cortex commanders, however, at the very lowest end of the spectrum, definitely going to suffer a little bit. Nice deny right there. Rover already finding some value, shutting down one of the metal extractors for the blue commander, and now the Rover is in the backline pulling apart these mexes. Cleaned up by Nebuchadnezzar's commander, otherwise known as Neb. Nicely done. Yeah, going to shut that down before it can do too much more damage, and the grunts are going to be out already to deflect any more incoming enemy aggression. Now the question I have is, how is Armada looking these days? Typically, we would basically see nothing but Cortex. We saw Cortex in basically all shapes and sizes, the most common of which would be to go for a Cortex bot lab into a Cortex vehicle lab. You start producing those grunts, and more importantly, a couple of these cheap constructors, and then eventually you move out on the field and go ahead and build a vehicle lab, and you start pumping out those incisors as quickly as you can. The incisors, metal for metal cost, are probably one of the most efficient, one of the most, high value per cost units in the early game. Relatively fast, relatively high DPS, relatively good movement speed as well. There's not a lot of things, and relatively low cost. There's really not a lot that's bad about the incisor. It's, I guess it's a little more pricey than the Cortex, or pardon me, the Armada equivalent, but still not bad. A little bit of aggression now on this side of the map. The Grunt's getting a decent surround right here, but I think there's enough blitzes to finally blast all this down. Blitz is taking a fair trade. You know what? 2 Grunts for 2 blitzes is not actually so great. Yeah, Constructor lives here too, so it's not like this is really gonna shut down the expansion progress too quickly, too boldly. Yeah, all said and done, that actually probably was worse of a trade than I think the Red Commander was expecting. Now, technically speaking, you can out micro blitzes with a Grunt. It's very difficult to do. Blitzes are faster than Grunts, but if the Grunt outranges the Blitz, and if you have enough of them, you can actually out micro them, which is an interesting thing. One of those few instances where bots could somewhat beat vehicles. Somewhat. Very, very somewhat. Most of the time, though, bots are just inferior to vehicles as a point of balance. It's just the way that it is. You pay a heavier price for those vehicles, but obviously you also get a slightly sturdier, slightly more mobile, slightly better across-the-board unit in general. Here we go, though. Modulo doing a great job of slipping these vehicles into the backline, and just like this, oh, nice self-D right there. Nice little bit of micro from the blue commander. Neb realizes there's not really any way that units are going to be able to deal with this before it becomes a problem later on, so self-destructs the metal extractor, giving up 1 mex to spare the many, and manages to save the economy from further threat right there. That's a high-level move, and that's really difficult to do. It's difficult to justify that, right? But they did make it a little easier to self-destruct those mexes. It only takes about 2 seconds from mex to self-destruct. Was that a self-D? I didn't catch it. It absolutely was. Very, very cool to see. It's one of those little micro things, right? But the pros can pull it off, but we hardly ever see it in the level of leagues. just kind of highlighting how deep this game really is. There's a lot of strategic depth to everything about this game, and sometimes we don't get the greatest glimpse into exactly what that looks like. Grunt's looking for an opportunity path over here, but this has been nicely locked down right here by Modulo, the Red Commander, who's gone ahead and built a couple of those LLTs on top of those metal extractors. There is still the opportunity path of running up this hill right here, around the side, down through the hill over here, and then past into the base, but that's a very complex and, more importantly, a very long path, so it would take a while for those goblins, those grunts, to get past. Can you tell I've been playing with a lot of Legion recently? Goblin's the Legion spam bot, so it's a very, very powerful one. One of those units that you can make just about 1 billion of. They're sort of like ticks. They're a little bit more expensive, just a little bit. They're very, very good, though. Yeah, nice little run by here. Manages to take down one of the metal extractors and going to kill some of these blitzes at the very least. One of the grunts makes it through as well. Ignored right here. LLT cleans it up, luckily. All said and done, was that enough aggression? I'm not entirely sure. It's going to be a lot of metal for the reclaim right here for the Red Commander. Eating all that up shouldn't be the end of the world. We are going to eventually start up some build power here as well. I can't help but notice, though, that the Blue Commander has a 10% eco lead, just as collecting the metal extractors across the board has been phenomenally successful. Got an LLT coming up on the southern side. Should be enough to, at the very least, thwart some of the push right here from the Red Commander. A single LLT capable of scratching up a commander quite badly. Multiple LLTs capable of downright killing a commander that steps too far forward. In a very short amount of time, too. It only takes, I think it's about 4% per blast from an LLT if the whole blast connects with the commander. I want to say, obviously, then that it blasts pretty effectively, considering most of the time there's some sort of flanking going on. Modulo sniffs this out, though, realizes that there's actually an LLT over here, comes in with the D-gun before it's finished, and manages to shut this down quite nicely. Going to set up LLTs of his own in order to cordon off this section of the map. Trying to carve out a little section of the map for the Red Commander to inhabit. LLT here finishes up and is going to be more than enough to blast down the construction bot right here. Yeah, very nice. Now, obviously, these LLTs are very vulnerable to Rocketeers. If you just have one aggravator here and there across the map, they can be very annoying to deal with because, obviously, there's only so much you can do about those Rocketeers. If they're spread out, they're not going to blast down those LLTs very quickly, but mind you, but they are eventually going to be able to take them down. And eventually is really all it takes. Eventually means that you're going to have to be in multiple places at once. It can really put a stressor on any kind of commander that's worried about microing. Otherwise, a successful engagement. Turns into quite an APM intensive one. You can imagine 1 or 2 Rocketeers firing away right here. It suddenly turns this fight into a very efficient siege. Whereas these grunts are going to give their lives for not much ground over here. Neb steps forward, strategically utilizing the commander to step forward here and try and snipe that LLT, and manages to get it. LLT's now coming up on the high ground here as well. Janus tank out on patrol, and you do have to be quite careful. Those Janus tanks can blast down commanders relatively swiftly, but we have a lot of units on the field right here. A couple of resurrected units too, which is always cool to see. Those resbots putting in work, making sure that all these units get back up and get back into the fight, and suddenly this army is looking gigantic. Whereas me on the southern side, Modulo not doing anything with the commander is a little bit concerning. We've also got 1,400 metal in the bank. Feels like we should probably be spending that metal either on more units, either on more build power, more economy, more something, just to make sure that we're putting that metal on the field one way or another. One effective tool, of course, is always to go for those solar panels, because you never really know the advanced solar panels it is, because you never really know when that wind energy is going to give out on you. You can see the Red Commander stalling for energy right now, as a matter of fact, trying to dump as much of that metal as possible into solar panels and wind turbines and all sorts of stuff. But at the end of the day, if you don't have enough constructors building wind turbines, you're not really going to be able to scale them fast enough for when this energy stall hits the proverbial fan. Or the literal fan, I guess. Wind turbines are basically just big fans, but in reverse. The more you know. Modulo continuing to expand this southern side, but yeah, you can see trying to just dump as much metal into those solar panels as possible. It's a little bit of a cope, right? Putting metal into those solar panels is basically just saying, well, I don't have anything better to put this metal into. May as well spend it on something rather than nothing. And I think it's definitely, it's dangerous. It's dangerous because you can end up putting those solar panels down and then somebody kills one of them or you just forget to reclaim it, and there's 155 metal out on the field that really should be used a little bit more efficiently. You can get away with it in 8v8s because obviously in 8v8s there's, well, 7 other commanders that are able to pick up some of the slack from inefficiencies. In a 1v1 though, and especially a pro-level 1v1, we are expecting basically the best of the best to have the best of the best sort of micro and eco management. I guess that's micro and macro management. Grunts diving very aggressively here. Oh, and they're grouped up too. Grouped up, rather. Self-D on all these units here. Ooh, that's a brutal self-D right there. I don't know if that was warranted, per se. Yeah, question marks from the spectators as well. I'm not so sure that that was necessarily warranted. A lot of units. I mean, I suppose, yeah, it's better than giving them out to the enemy, but were all those self-destructs necessary? I'm not entirely convinced. Medium tanks here, ooh, just barely escaping the D-gun right there, trying to fire away at Modulo's commander, manages to scratch that commander for 3% HP. Very nicely done. We are pivoting now into vehicle gameplay. So you can see the blue commander now with a sizable economy up and running, over 500 energy production, which is really what you need to start producing those medium tanks. Gonna start blasting out as many of those tanks as possible. Quite a lot of energy storage is here, too. My goodness. 20,000 energy worth of storage for Neb. Apparently, yeah, not willing to lose the game over an energy stall here. Going for way more energy storage than I feel like we normally see. Well, early self-Ds on these. Will it be in time? So hard to predict that. Yeah, you'd almost have to self-D those before even the attack came in. Blitzes storming through the southern side. There's not really a defense on this lower angle, so this is a dangerous attack. Medium tanks moved into position to try and intercept us as best they can. The problem with those medium tanks is they're just slow, and it takes a long time for them to turn their cannons around, too. And just like that, the Blitzes managed to get into the backline. They're going to start tearing apart this base. Wind turbines going up in smoke, and the only saving grace here is that the wind turbines are also exploding the very Blitzes that are killing them. A sort of self-solving problem, if you will, but definitely a rough way of solving the problem. Eventually cleaned up. And altogether, not the end of the world. A couple of wind turbines down, metal extractors scuffed up, but not dead, and the constructors still live to tell the tale. So they're not going to be knocked out of the game quite yet. Meanwhile, with the counterattack, the blue forces are moving in, and these medium tanks, they don't care so much for those light laser towers as the grunts do. Going to be much easier to slip past the defenses here. Not to mention blasting them down right there quite nicely. Self-D. So far, Neb has been completely on top of it with his self-D. Not going to be the case this time, but doing a great job so far microing that. Little tank that was stalled out over here is a bit odd. Yeah, the little tank that could. This is nice. This is a huge catch, actually. Yeah, Janus tank suddenly jumped on top of by the brutes here. The blue medium tanks catching a huge portion of the red army. Oh, no. These tanks never should have been unassisted by some sort of assault force in the front. This is a gigantic catch right there for the blue army. That's, I want to say, about 800 metal worth of tanks completely down the drain right there. They were jumped on by those medium tanks, basically the perfect unit for countering those. And that's going to be a decisive victory right there for the blue commander. A decisive battle won, at the very least. Neb continuing to reinforce his lane, by the way, building a whole bunch of LLTs, trying to constantly refortify, but it is a little bit tricky. Once you move into these tank battles, those LLTs become a lot less important. Suddenly you start looking at flamethrower turrets, or you start looking at things like just units. Yeah, more and more units on the field. Whoa, Blitz finds the E-converters. That hurts. Yeah, popping those E-converters definitely hurts. Not to mention the metal extractors and other units that they killed, like the constructor there. We do have more of them, by the way. A lot of idle constructors. Definitely an area for improvement. A minor nitpick, though, on a relatively successful game. That eco advantage has flipped on its head, though. With those E-converters going down, suddenly 36% metal advantage for the red commander means it's time for tanks. Blitzes and Janus is the name of the game. We have missile trucks coming out here, too. What an interesting queue of units. Yeah, we've got quite a nice spread going on for the red commander, just producing whatever they can. And going ahead and claiming as many of these metal extractors as possible, too. Yeah, Modulo moving around and trying to claim as many of these as possible. Setting up little LLT fields as well to try and fight under. Always efficient to fight under static defense, even if the static defense itself isn't necessarily very efficient. Might as well take the fight where your firepower is the strongest. This little quad guard of, well, sentries. Doing a great job. Meanwhile, LLTs on the northern highlands blasting down at least one of those constructors here that was trying to reclaim the wreckage. Beamer turret's going to be queued up right now. Those medium laser turrets are quite good, but I doubt that we're going to be able to set those up in time before the medium tanks make their way back up north here. Meanwhile, a massive army is mounting on the southern side, and those blitzes have been dangerous. When you move into this medium tank territory, it's easy to feel like you have units in all positions on the map, but realistically, those medium tanks are very slow. So if you don't have them in exactly the right position, blitzes can very easily overwhelm you. There we go, though. Janus firing away where they can and connecting those missiles on a lot of these blue tanks. Nice jump right here by the red tanks as well. Trying to get a good surround on a bunch of these brutes, but it's a back and forth battle. There we go. Yeah, Constructor managing to reclaim a bunch of this. This is really what the battle is told, though. This construction vehicle reclaiming a whole bunch of this metal is pulling tons of resources back towards the red facility here. Oh, and apparently it's enough to transition into an air lab. Cheeky, cheeky. Resbot's going to be the strategy here for the blue commander. Unprepared entirely for air here, but we are going to use the Resbots to resurrect as many of these tanks as possible. An interesting strategy. After not taking very much damage on the wind turbine fields here for a long time, I feel like the red commander is feeling a bit pressed for energy. Whereas, yeah, our blue commander with, well, see, that's the thing, is the Armada wind turbines are so cheap that I feel like that advantage has been made back. Still a rough battle here, though. An energy production overall advantage here for the blue commander, Neb, who's been a little more consistent about that energy production, but for the time being, it's going to be the red commander in the lead here, and of course that means that gap is closing. Good old medium tank battles. Always difficult to tell how these medium tank battles are going out. It's basically always just the commander with more tanks. Oh, this is nice. Yeah, fatal indeed. These blitzes get into the backline and they're going to be able to do a ton of damage. Construction turrets already queued up to try and disintegrate these. I think a shuriken or two would be warranted as well. Going for a shuriken in order to, yeah, actually blast these and paralyze them, stun them so that the units can clean them up nicely. Thug going the wrong way here. There we go. Eventually cleaning up that blitz, but that's an annoying bit of damage right there. Ooh, Janice manages to connect with some of those Resbots too. You can feel Neb feeling the pressure right now. Definitely. We're going for a little bit of a Banshee snipe. So far, we've only produced a few of them. Well, 7 of them is actually no joke. That's a good amount of Banshee. Takes about 12 to kill a commander pretty consistently before they cloak and manage to hide themselves. Air lab deconstructed. I'm surprised we went for the air lab and then didn't produce any shuriken. You can imagine a bundle of shuriken would, well, that's the thing. We have the missile trucks here too. Yeah, it's actually a great composition right now from the red commander. Neb relying heavily on these medium tanks, not broadening the composition much because, frankly speaking, Cortex really can't. They don't have a lot of options for broadening this scope of their composition. Nice D-guns right here. Oh, that's a lot of Janus missiles, though. That's a lot of Janus missiles, and boom goes the blue commander, underestimating the firepower of this composition, and it does mean Modulo will manage to win the game before the Banshees ever even show their face. Producing the most resources at 2,055,247 total. It'll be our red commander, Modulo, who manages to take this game of 1v1 beyond all reason. Thanks a ton for watching, and I sure hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you again in the very next cast of Beyond All Reason. Peace out, everybody, and stay classy.